Today, on energy contact, do you ever notice that with some things that the reaction is a lot different than the initial action, and they can be linked by unseen paths? Even your TV remote is an example of this. You press the button over here, and the TV goes on over there. What's in between them? Well, nothing as best we can tell. We're going to look at reflexes and pipelines today. So if you want to test out that remote thing, please wait 30 minutes or so, because you won't want to miss what's coming up the pipe right now on Energy Contact. Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. There's just something about us that loves to separate and categorize, dissect, put one little chunk under the microscope and look at it in a vacuum. But in fact, all that health, growth, and self-improvement we're talking about take place when we do just the opposite. It takes place when we put these things together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move right ahead with that. Let's bring up our slide. Everyone please understand that I am not a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor. This show is not a medical advice program of any kind. I don't give medical advice. Now, I might call myself an energy healer, a chakra healer, things like that. So might a lot of other people. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. They call me no such thing, and it's very important that you know that. There's a lot of important information on your screen right now. If you would, please read all of that with your full attention, and I'll appreciate it. When you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. And here's why you want to do that. At the end of this show, we're going to roll some credits, and on those credits, there's going to be contact information for me. Now, I encourage you to contact me. I'm sort of hoping that something I'll tell you will inspire you to want to contact me. But in order to do that, you're going to need my contact information. And in order to get that, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There will be plenty of time to jot that information down at the end of the show, if you have your pencil and paper ready. All right, everybody got that? Let's come back here. Today's show is show number 55. And if you're tuning in for the first time today, thanks and welcome. These shows are sequential. They build. So we're talking about things today that we've introduced and explained on previous shows. There's some ramp up things, some up to speed stuff that you will have missed out on. However, I'm doing my very best to make each program have a lot of value on a standalone basis. And I think today's show does. If it is your first time, though, or one of your first time, and if what you see piques your interest, then I'll invite and encourage you to look around, because there will be earlier shows airing at later times. They'll either be re-airing right here on this channel, or perhaps different times, different days, in different areas. And if you look for them, I'll really appreciate it. All right, and now we've come to the time of the show where I get to bring my co-host on camera. Let's get Slim on here. This is my buddy Slim. Slim is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what it is that the energy contacts in the physical self, we have to know a few things about a few things, don't we? We need to know something about energy, and today's program is a program about energy. But all of that energy out there somewhere does us no good whatsoever. It does us no good at all until we bring it into contact with something. Well, Slim is here to help us understand that, to help us understand that thing that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. Okay, previously on Energy Contact, we have been looking at the things that you cannot see that are building all the things you can see. As is the case with ice and water and steam, there are a lot of things that look very different, that our senses perceive as different things, but they're all exactly the same. We've been discussing flows as well on Energy Contact, pipelines and channels within our body and what flows through them. When we were kids, we were told that these bodies of ours were these discrete individual hunks of mass, separate from one another, to be sure, but even worse than that, separate from ourselves, a body separate from mind, separate from spirit, intellect, so on and so forth. On Energy Contact, we've seen ourselves a little bit differently than that. We've seen ourselves the way Einstein saw us, as frequencies, as rhythms and vibrations, as internal forces acted upon by external ones, all the same. Whatever it is that makes you look the way you look, act the way you act, think the way you think, and feel the way you feel is a function of these unseen energy flows, those internal forces themselves, and all the energies that flow through them. And anything that flows has a current, like electricity does, or like a river does. Now, currents can shock us, they can overwhelm us, carry us away, they can kill us, but they can also be controlled, mastered, wielded into things that benefit us. We've seen that while all these forces are invisible, they manifest themselves, they bring themselves about in very physical ways, in very visible ways. They manifest into our bodies, into the physical us. In fact, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to be a spiritual person until and unless we know how to promote the flow of invisible energy through our physical structure. We've seen over the past few shows that many things that look and feel different are the same things. And many things that look and feel the same are in fact very different. Many things that are unreal appear real, and many things that are real appear unreal. 1,000,000 different people will look at the exact same thing, and they'll see 1,000,000 different objects. And we've looked at that invisible body intellect, haven't we? All those things, we have always thought of them as brain things. Memory, thought, recall, intellect, reason, logic, all those things are in fact in every cell of our body. They permeate every cell of our body. We build everything into that body intellect. The reflexes, the actions, the reactions, everything. And then that body intellect turns right around and builds us. And we've spoken about another thing on Energy Contact, about this invisible, mysterious energy that the old Indian mystics called Kundalini energy. So today, we're continuing to look at these invisible yet very real channels or pipelines through which energy flows in us. But we're also beginning to look at what flows through these things, and about the stops and the nodes and the checkpoints that either facilitate the flows of energy through us or crimp them off. We're also today going to investigate a little cause and effect, how the actions that occur in one location of us show results that happen in a completely different place. Isaac Newton, he told us that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. He told us that a few hundred years ago, and I'm down with that. But sometimes it happens in ways that makes it difficult to see or understand the connection between them. We want to look at that today. So we're looking at invisible things, things that a surgeon could cut us open and look for all day long, and he would not find them. But yet Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein, they don't have a problem with that. They and we have seen that these invisible things are very real. Remember, while we want to understand what it is that flows through these pipes, all of that understanding doesn't do us much good if we don't understand the pipes themselves. Okay, so before we go on, we have reached the part of our show where we get to relax for a second. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you're in a place you can do that, because we have reached our virtual field trip. We take our virtual field trip about this time of every show. Today, visualize that you see a friend, and as you come up to him, he's grimacing, and you see him grabbing his hand. And so you say to him, "Oh my goodness, you must have really slammed your hand into something. That looks painful." And he says, "No, I didn't. I banged my elbow, and I banged it really hard too. I banged my funny bone, but you know what? There's nothing very funny about it. I can't figure out why my hand is so sore and so numb, and I can't grip anything with it. And so you reply to him, whoa, if your hand is that sore, well then your elbow must really be hurting you. And he says, well no, not really. My elbow feels just fine actually. I can't figure that out either. And so for a second you stop and think. You think, wait a minute, my friend banged his elbow, which doesn't hurt at all, and his hand, which nothing got anywhere near, is all messed up. Huh. Hold that thought. Hold that thought and let's go immediately to a slide. We're going to look at a couple of pictures here. We saw these previously. On one side of your screen there, on the left side, is something called the caduceus. It's the symbol of the medical profession. Those two snakes on it cross that staff at 7 places. We're going to see that that's important in a few minutes. The word caduceus means the messenger's staff, or the herald's staff. On the right side of your screen is something called the Sushumna Nadi, and those circles on it are things called chakras. That is the symbol for Tantra and for something called Kundalini Shakti. We've seen that while these two diagrams represent quite different things now, that they come from the same place, that they're representations of each other, and that they're depicting the exact same thing. All right, let's come up here. Most of you guys who have heard any of the history of the caduceus, of that medical symbol at all, you haven't heard the full story. We were told in health class that caduceus comes to us from the Greeks. It comes to us from Greek mythology. Myth has it that it was the magic wand of Hermes, the messenger god. Now Hermes, in Roman mythology, his name is Mercury. We've named a precious metal and we've named a planet after him. They're the same guy. This fellow Mercury or Hermes, whoever, had a staff. That's what's important to know. And like his feet, this staff had wings. Now as the story goes, one day Hermes saw 2 snakes fighting. And when he saw that, he threw that winged staff at them. And they started wrapping around it. They started weaving their way up that staff. And as they did so, they became at peace. They stopped fighting. And the wounds they inflicted on each other healed. Another Greek figure, a fellow named Asclepius, he was the prototype demigod of surgery and medicine and healing. He is often pictured in the sculptures they have of him. He's sculpted with a snake and a staff too. And so that's how the legends go. But that is really not the origin of the story of the caduceus. The Greeks got their story from the Egyptians. Now the Egyptians tell the story of a great healer named Thoth or Tahuti. Now these are 2 names. They're allegedly 2 different guys, but the stories have gotten merged and mingled all over time. So we'll tell them like they're the same guy. They were mortals, by the way, not gods. And whoever it was, Thoth, Tahuti, whoever, he was reputed to carry around a staff, a snake wrap staff. Why? Well, because in those days, medicine was very primitive, and magic and medicine were about the same thing, and hygiene was not what it is today. So a lot of people had parasitic worms, and the treatment was to cut a hole into the poor person and put a staff into that hole, and just hopefully, just sometimes, those worms would climb out of the person and up the staff, and hence the caduceus. But even that is not the origin of the caduceus. Well before Greece and well before Egypt, there was India, the Indian civilization, and very wise Indian yogis, rishis they were called, had a story of a staff that had 7 crossing points. This staff, as they told it, was analogous to a spine. It was like a spine, and through it ran an invisible but a very real something they called the Sushumna Nadi. I'm going to put that word up on your screen in a second so you can see it. Energy shimmied up this staff in a snake-like motion, crossing at those 7 points. Those 7 points where the snakes crossed on the caduceus. And when it got to the top, according to the rishis, that energy was no longer earthbound. It was as if it had wings. Okay, so now we're talking, I think. Now it's starting to come together for you, I hope. Let's bring back our slide of the caduceus and the Sushumna, and you can see it again. There they are. The 7 crossing points are the nodes in the journey of energy as it falls up, and they're the nodes of that snake there where I put the little colored dots. Now you can see the snakes crossing on that caduceus, of course. But can you see how the snakes are represented around those chakras there? It's abstract, but they're on there. See the little red and blue pipelines that go on the outside of those circles there. We mentioned the sushumna. That's the staff in the middle, the pole right up the middle. But those little red and blue things, they're pipes too. They're nadis. They're called the Ida and the Pingala. Before anyone ever thought up stories about Hermes or caducei, there were the sushumna, the Ida, and the Pingala nadis. What are they? Well, we're about to find out. But for right now, what we want to know is that these two things on your screen represented the exact same thing. And despite the denial of many, they still do. All right, hold that thought and let's move to the next slide. I promised you a little explanation of terms, and here it comes. We want to review these terms, which means we're going to review some of the energy pipelines that flow through us. These aren't words you see every day, so I think it's just helpful to see them on the screen. Now, those of you who have been every show, please pardon all the review, and please bear with me. But it's absolutely essential that we understand the parallels between the things that we can see and the things that we cannot. All right? Okay, let's come back here. In your body, you have pipes. Maybe you don't think about it, but you do. Some are very easy to visualize. You have veins and arteries, blood vessels, just for starters. And what are they? Well, they're energy pipelines. They carry blood, which carry oxygen and energy and nutrients throughout your body. And they have to keep that contained in that pipeline. You have pipelines that are your digestive system processing food energy in and out. You have air pipelines, brachii, and all the lung things processing air and oxygen in and out. They're all energy pipelines. And then there's the pipelines that cause you to feel pain when you bump your elbow and cause you to feel that numbness in your hand. That's the energy. It's an electrical energy that goes through your nerves. And your central nervous system goes up from your core, up through your spine, and right into your brain. Now that spine, that's where a lot of action is. And it's represented by that staff and that caduceus we saw, and it's represented by that sushumna nadi. And remember, the energy that moves through it falls up. All right, so let's look at a couple of more energy pipelines. Let's get my buddy Cool Chi Guy on camera here. Cool Chi Guy is getting a little camera time these past few shows. There's my pal. He is an acupuncture model. He's a roadmap for acupuncturists. And I'm going to point out a couple of see all those little points on him? Those are acupuncture points. They're labeled. But we want to look at the meridians, the little blue lines that connect them. That's what we're interested in. Just to take a second with those points are called subo in Chinese. They're the acupuncture points. And the word subo means earthen pots, or maybe even earthen vessel. You Bible students out there will draw a parallel from that. If we wanted to, we could call those little dots chakras. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We want to focus again on the lines that connect those dots. And those lines are what are called meridians. And what are meridians? Well, meridians are energy channels, and through them flow chi. Now, we have hundreds of tsubo in our body. And with rare exception, they're all located along those lines, and there's only 14 of those meridian lines. It's the meridians that are the pipes. And the energy pipelines don't stop there. Have you ever heard of reflexology? Let's come back up here. There we are. Smart people figured out once upon a time that you can sort of map out the entire body on the bottom of your feet. We'll bring that up in a couple of seconds. Different Westerners have varying degrees of confidence in exactly the extent of what that means, but almost everybody, from the most stringent scientist and the most stringent skeptic, understands that there is some sort of correlation between points on the bottom of your feet and points in other part of your body. Now, many people don't know for sure why. They think maybe it has to do with nerve channels, maybe it has to do with Cool Chi Guy's meridians, whatever. But on energy contact, we do know something. We know that if there's no difference between anything, then there's no difference between our mass and energy. And if there's no difference between our mass and energy, then just perhaps there's no difference between points on certain parts of us and corresponding locations in other parts of us. Let's bring up a chart, and we'll look at some feet here. Here is a map of your feet to your body coming up. The term to describe what people do with your feet is called reflexology because if you push somewhere down here, you get a reflex somewhere else. And there's more to reflexology than feet, by the way. Let's bring up our next, here we are, look at there, there's some hand reflexology. Your hand reflexes to every part of your body too. Want to see more? Well, look here, those two circles there represent your eyeballs, or at least the colored part of them. This is a chart of the reflexology of the iris of your eye. It's called iridology. And we're not done yet. Look here. Here's a chart of the reflexology of the ear. And not only that, but we could go on. Everything in you hooks into something that goes through a pipeline to somewhere else in you. Just like when you bump your funny bone. It's all connected, all the same. All right, let's come back up here. So, it's not our purpose today on Energy Contact to learn about reflexology. It's a fascinating topic. Maybe in the future we'll do a few shows about it. But for now, we're just showing you all this because we want to understand that just as the case with veins and arteries, there are pipelines in us that take something from one part of us and pipe it over to another part of us. There's something, just like there's something that takes that invisible signal from your remote to your television. Just like there's something that takes that bump on your elbow out into your hand. Now let's get to the energy pipeline that's the focal point for people who want to understand chakras and Kundalini energy. Let's come back and we'll bring up another slide here. This is the same slide we saw earlier, but we brought up spine. And I want to make sure that we all keep in mind that the spine has something to do with. So there's our spine right between the caduceus and the sushumna nadi and the chakras. Now, I've mentioned the term sushumna a few times today, but if you missed the last few episodes of Energy Contact, today is the first time perhaps you've heard the term sushumna. Let's get you up to speed with that. Old Indian yogis knew what that sushumna nadi was. This picture, the picture of what's on the right of your screen, is about the same. It's probably identical to pictures that they would have drawn 6,000, maybe 10,000 years ago. And it's analogous to that spine, just like that caduceus is. Now you can't really draw a picture of a nadi or a chakra because they're not physical things. Just like you can't draw a picture of what it is that goes from your remote to your television, or the Earth's axis, or the equator, or love, or air, or integrity. Lots of things that are real that you can't draw. So what's on your screen right now is a model. It's an attempt to represent something real that happens to be invisible. Yet still more real than a lot of things that you can see and that you can pick up. All right, let's come back up here. So the term nadi, we've thrown that around today. That's just another energy channel. You can think of a nadi as being like a blood vessel. Perhaps more accurately, you can think of nadis as being like Kulchi Gai's meridians. Only difference is Kulchi Gai has 14 meridians and you have, according to those old yogis, about 72,000 nadis in you. You got big ones, little ones, long ones, short ones, nadis wrapped around nadis, nadis inside nadis. They're all over the place. Our surgeon we mentioned earlier could cut you open all day long and look for a nadi. He wouldn't find one of those either, but they're very real. 72,000 of them sounds like a lot, but it's important to keep in mind that you have about 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels in you. They won't give you a number because they all sort of melt into each other and they can't really count them. But there's enough to stretch around the earth 2.5 times. So, blood vessels, you got big ones and little ones, long ones and short ones of those too. And most of them are tiny little capillaries, just like most of your nadis are tiny little nadis. All right, let's keep our focus on what we're looking at here though. We want to understand energy pipelines and what flows through them. Blood flows through your veins and arteries, and blood carries energy. Electrical impulses flow through your nerves, and electricity is energy. Chi flows through meridians, chi is energy. Something they call prana flows through those nadis, and prana is energy. They're all the same. They're all just different words to describe the same thing. Now remember that the ancients, those old mystics, they were interested in a particular manifestation of energy. The energy that flows up through us from the earth. And funny, so are we. In India, this earthy energy was known as Kundalini, and it flowed up those three main nadis we mentioned, the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. And they shimmied up like snakes. And they went through those 7 crossing points in the Sushumna nadi. And those 7 crossing points are called chakras. So, we've finally gotten to a place where we can begin to understand chakras and Kundalini energy. Now, yogis who want to understand Kundalini energy and the chakras, be they the prehistoric yogis or present modern ones, they study something called Kundalini energy, Kundalini yoga. But be careful, because here's where the plot thickens. Because Kundalini yoga is a subset of Tantra yoga. We can't even begin to consider the chakras without considering this Kundalini energy. There's something called Kundalini Shakti. But to embrace the concept of Kundalini is to embrace Tantra. So when your new agey friend talks about opening up his or her third eye chakra, well, they're talking about practicing Tantra. And by the way, they might think they want to open their third eye. They might be parroting something they heard at a party that sounds cool. But whether they're trying to impress you or whatever, they probably really have no idea what they're talking about. And if they did, it's very likely that opening up their third eye chakra is about the last thing that they want to do. So, we're moving into some new subject matter on energy contact. And this is where we're going to take up next time. Remember, the word yoga means union, and we're going to talk a lot about union. And the word tantra means to weave or to combine together. So when we start talking about tantra yoga, we're talking about weaving and combining energy together in unity. Now think back to that caduceus we looked at, and it sort of describes what they're doing, huh? So, tantra is mystical stuff, and that's where we're going next time. And we'll get into all this chakra business, and we'll understand it a lot more. But for today, we're out of time. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Until then, I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in energy contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping in